Thank you, Tero. Now I hope everybody is able to see our shared slides. Welcome to this Accessibility in Digital Society educational launch event, which is taking place today. It's great to see so many of you here. And we have a very interesting program today. We can switch to the next slide. But before introducing the program, we like to introduce how you can use live transcript, which is an automatic feature of Zoom, similar to some features available in other communication programs. If you go for the Zoom bottom bar, which should be available in your Zoom client, regardless of which platform you are using, and you can have here this live transcript button, which is visualized also on the left side of the slide, and this should give you subtitles. The transcription is surprisingly good. Sometimes, of course, it makes some mistakes, but I think it's pretty useful for this kind of purposes. All right, I hope everybody is able to find that. And let's go for the next slide. Thanks, Tero. This is the program we are having today. First, I will introduce Taku with my colleagues, Maya and Camilla. Then, Pichu and Tero are giving introduction to Accessibility in Digital Society, which is the educational offering that we are launching today. Then we have three exciting talks. First one is given by Mark Häkkinen, who is the Director of Digital Accessibility from ETS US. Then we have a talk given by Hanna Kroselnik, who is Executive Director and Language Expert. And then our dear President, Mari Walsh, will give her opening words. So let's introduce our unit who is behind this program. If you could go for the next slide. This is our logo, and we are talking TACU means Tampere Accessibility Unit. It was established just last year, a collaboration between two research centers. I'm personally a professor of interactive technology, coming from Tampere Unit for Human-Computer Action. I have a strong computer science and human technology interaction viewpoint in my own research and teaching. And then I have two colleagues, Maya and Camilla. Maybe you can say something on your behalf.
Okay, I'm Maija Hirvonen, Associate Professor in German Language, Culture and Translation.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Camilla Lindholm. I'm Professor of Nordic Languages, and I approach the area of accessibility from the point of departure of most easy and accessible language.
As you can see, we are quite multidisciplinary group already, and this is only 3 professors of us. The whole team consists now more than 10 people who have a lot of experience from different accessibility initiatives, both from the research and educational perspectives. And on the right side, you can see that how we are able to approach accessibility as in overall. First of all, there's a physical accessibility, esteettömyys in Finnish, and then there's the digital accessibility. And as you can clearly see, if we think this from research, society, and educational point of view, TACU, our unit, is more on digital accessibility. We of course take physical accessibility into account in all the activities that we do, but our contribution is definitely on digital accessibility, and from a research and education perspectives, of course, taking the societal aspects into account in all of our work. So we do carry out accessibility-related research. We have done that in our individual teams for a long time. Personally, I have been involved in accessibility research for more than 2 decades by now. The very first project that I was involved as a young PhD student was focusing on visually impaired users at that time. But what we are addressing today is more on educational offerings, and that since we saw that there was a clear gap in this field, we had active research which has like a lot of that, but in our education we were not coherently addressing accessibility, and actually we find out that there is no such thing in other universities as well. So that led us to establish this offering that we are now launching. And we have been lucky to be in touch with a lot of external stakeholders, different kind of associations, companies, all of those who work with accessibility, and we have received a lot of support and tools from our stakeholders. So thank you for all of them. You can find more information about our about the TACU unit from the web address which is shown on the slides. But now I think it's time to introduce more our educational offering, and I'm handing over this to Pichu and Tero. So would you be kind to continue from here?
Yes, thank you so much, Marco. So here, before we go into the accessibility education, we first want to focus a little bit or provide some key inputs about disability. So there are over 1 billion people, which forms around roughly 15% of the whole population, who suffer from some kind of disability. And this disability is not only related to physical disabilities, but also includes cognitive or social disability. So people with disabilities are more likely to experience adverse socioeconomic outcomes, meaning that they are in a way facing barriers in accessing technology, accessing information, and accessing resources. So there are different layers of hindrances which are created for these people who are disabled in some form or the other. And moreover, the disability is increasing in people because of various other reasons, such as aging or some kind of disease and so on. Next slide, please. So what is digital accessibility? Previously, Marco mentioned that broadly you can categorize accessibility into physical and digital accessibility. But when it comes to digital accessibility, there are these three kinds of areas which are actually forming the barrier to accessibility or digital accessibility. One is the sensory, second one is the cognitive, and third one is the physical. So here, if we go by the general definition of accessibility, it's the quality of being able to be reached or entered or having access to. And when it comes to specifically about digital accessibility, it refers to designing services, products, environments, and things like these through which people with disabilities can access a device or service or information. Next slide, please. As I mentioned previously, there are this is one of the most popular myths surrounding accessibility and disability. There are people who believe that accessibility is only related to people having disabilities, but that's not the case. For example, if we go to a website and the website language is different from what you understand, then that is also an accessibility issue. So I mean, like a person may not be having any physical or mental disability, but just because the language is not able to cater to the user's needs, that forms an accessibility barrier. Similarly, suppose you are traveling in a bus or in a train, and you want to type a text onto your mobile phone, but because of the movement of the bus or train, you're not able to do that kind of activity. So that is also an accessibility issue. Third one is something like you are in a way want to access some information, say password entry, and you are not able to do that, then that is also an accessibility issue. So it's the popular myth is that accessibility is only related to physical disability or people with disabilities, but that is not the case. So this is one of the popular myths surrounding accessibility. Next slide, please. So digital accessibility is related to usability, or usability forms a very essential part of accessibility. And accessibility addresses aspects that are concerning discrimination and inequality. So when you make a system or digital system accessible, you are in a way reducing discrimination and inequality. Then third point is accessibility addresses the needs of different people. So when you consider accessibility, your design, when you consider different people in accessible design, what you're basically doing is you're taking inputs from different kinds of users, and these users will be providing inputs how to design the system. Then accessibility easily becomes a feature of the physical environment. This is very particularly true if you take the analogy of the curb on the street. That is basically for people who are using wheelchair, but that curb also becomes a useful feature for rolling your trolleys. So in that sense, when you're making an accessible system, it is not only enabling normal users, but also providing other kinds of users, or bringing system accessible to different forms of users. Next. So our unit has been, TAPCO has been organizing different educational activities, which are roughly catering to 30 credits. And last year we started with our first course on fundamentals of accessibility, which is a very diverse course, having multidisciplinary inputs and covering very different options such as access, image, video, audio, and accessibility in games and usability issues. So these modules are designed in such a way that people from different backgrounds, different disciplines can gain benefit from these courses and make use of their own fields and contribute to the field of accessibility. Next slide, please. So these are the different courses that are our unit is offering in terms of accessibility. The first course is Fundamentals of Accessibility, which is, as I mentioned, is a multidisciplinary course. Second one is an a la carte of 21 mini modules from which students can choose from, and this course is called Methods and Technologies for Accessibility and Their Evaluation. And the third module is about, our third course is about independent project work, wherein a student can, or a person can evaluate in depth the company's website and provide accessibility related issues, identify accessibility related issues, and provide solutions for them. Next, please. So this is an overall view of what we are offering in Fundamentals of Accessibility. So this particular course, it's a 5-credit course, and last year we offered it in the summer school. So what this covers is it introduces the students to the details or the intricacies of accessibility, what is accessible design, or you address it in different ways. It's called by design for all, universal access, universal design, usability, universal usability, barrier-free design, and so on. So it covers different kinds of users who might be using excuse me, who might be using the system, say persons who are having cognitive impairments, what is in store for them in terms of accessibility, users who are having sensory impairments, what is the way around to have accessible solutions for them, how culture and communication is affecting the accessibility, and an assortment of courses, assortment of topics which is covered in this Fundamentals of Accessibility course. Next one. So this is a glimpse of what we have offered last year, and we have offered this course in the summer school in 2020, and there were 33 participants from 9 different countries, and these students involved were from different backgrounds in terms of their education level. Some were bachelor students, some were masters, and a couple of PhD students were also involved in this course. Next one. So this is the mini modules or the a la carte that we are offering in the methods and technologies module, and the word cloud displays the gamut of different options that a student can access in this course. So based on the interest and the inclination of the student can choose different modules. Say, for example, a person is interested in speech and speech interfaces and voice or spoken interfaces, then they can choose that particular module, combine it with spoken interfaces or dialogues and captions, and how those kinds of things are working, and combine a whole platform itself in this mini module series. Next one. So these are the list of 20 plus mini modules that we are offering in the methods and technologies course. So as you can see, there are modules such as picture communication, how pictures are used for communicating information, modules on spoken interfaces, where this is particularly important. The spoken interfaces is particularly important because of the availability of new devices such as Alexa and Google Home and Siri. Now people don't have to always type or text input their queries. You can just speak to your device, and that will be catering to your information needs. So how do you do that? How do you make it? How do you make the spoken communication accessible for different kinds of users? So that all those things are being covered in this module. So as you can see, there is a wide variety of topics based on which a student can easily make a selection of mini modules, and that will be based on their interests. Next one, please. Yeah.
Sure.
I'll now hand over the slides to Tero, and Tero will be discussing about the MOOC platform. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Pichu. Your good presentation. So now we have MOOC courses for all, and those are open. We have each one ECTs. And so we have saavutettavuuden perusteet MOOC, and then we have Introduction to Accessibility MOOC, which so basically those are same course and same topics, but the first one is in Finnish and second one is in English. Those provides a very brief overview to accessibility and covers topics such as what is basically questioning what is accessibility and discussing about that, and then we have very interesting introduction also to how to face person with disability. Then there is also discussion about legislation and policies related to different aspects. In the English version is actually covering more detail about international legislation and policies, and in Finnish version is actually more detailed details about Finnish way to deal with the digilaki, so to say. But that's pretty much what these offerings are now, and what are now today open, and we will offer more soon, and we will have this accessible culture, web accessibility, trends in accessibility, accessible teaching, web content accessibility and design, and accessible visual information, and also accessibility in AR, VR, and kind of mixed, covering mixed reality issues. And then we have also how to face a disabled person more in detail. And then also accessible media is one, and then we have accessible language. So we have a lot of things coming, and a lot of possibilities to actually get you known with accessibility, and also going very much to the details as well. So from my behalf, I would like to thank you and give the turn to Marco and Mark.
Thank you, Tero. Thank you, Pichu. Next, we are going to have our first keynote speaker for today, and he is Mark Häkkinen, who is a director of digital accessibility at ATS US. Mark is a leading expert on accessibility worldwide, and he has extensive knowledge on the area in the global sense. He is a docent of University of Jyväskylä and has given accessibility courses for years in Jyväskylä, which we have learned a lot also. We have met with Mark several times over the years, and he's actually the person who once convinced me that we should put effort to accessibility education in a big way, in addition to the research activity that we have been carrying out for more than 2 decades, as I already explained. So on my behalf, this was one of the main motivations to start this educational offering and also to establish Tampere Accessibility Unit. I was lucky to meet Maya and Camilla at the same time, and together we managed to gather this wonderful team around us who has been implementing these educational offerings that are open now. So thank you, Mark, for giving seats for what we are presenting today. And now we are able to enjoy Mark's presentation on accessibility in the post-COVID world, what we have learned and what we haven't. It's an extremely timely topic. The floor is yours, Mark.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'm really excited to see what our conversations some time ago have spawned here. It's a wonderful looking program. So let me share my screen, and we shall be here. I think you can see my screen, and I will start my slides. Okay, they're coming across okay? I think. Okay, so I'm really honored and thrilled to be here at this day, which is known internationally as Global Accessibility Awareness Day. And my topic today is accessibility in the post-COVID era. We've undergone tremendous changes and difficulties over the past over a year now. And from an accessibility perspective, we've learned a lot. And I fear that there are things that we have yet to learn from how we've addressed accessibility and inclusion during the COVID pandemic. So some of this has already been said in the prior presentations, but my focus professionally, personally, is on digital accessibility and inclusive design. And what we've been seeing over the last several years has been accessibility as a field of study, research, and practice growing in visibility and impact. We have, incredible technical standards and guidelines from the World Wide Web Consortium, or W3C, and these standards have become woven into the fabric of many technical standards that underlie the technologies we use today. So things on the web, obviously web documents, things like ebooks, EPUB. All of these technologies support accessibility. The big challenge is always having people understand what those capabilities are and using them. Of course, there are major gaps too, but we're working to solve those. Major technology companies, the ones that we use every day, the ones we have in our pocket or in our desktop, from Apple, Microsoft, including also others like Amazon, follow inclusive design principles today and create products that work for a broad range of abilities and disabilities. We've seen tremendous visibility of the efforts of Apple and Microsoft in this area in particular. And as was mentioned, laws in many countries now incorporate digital accessibility requirements. It's really now required for organizations in the US and soon in the European Union to, if they're going to be offering digital products and services, that these have to be accessible to a broad range of users. And just a quick look at the types of things that we have in our desktops or our pockets today. Accessibility features or settings from Apple Mac on the left, Microsoft Windows 10 in the center, and from the iPhone on the right. These are the things that are built in today in the products that we use to support accessibility. They support not just people with visual impairments through things like screen readers, but people who have low vision, who need magnification or color changes, through to support for captioning. For example, the captioning that we're benefiting from today in this presentation, touch interface adaptations, spoken voice control, support for physical switches and things that might be used by someone who cannot use a keyboard or other kinds of standard technologies. And just a further example of that, on my desk here at my home office, I have technologies that are assistive devices that today literally work out of the box. I have an iPhone on the right there. Above in the center, I have a fairly low-cost Braille display that is used by someone who's blind to read, and that connects wirelessly through Bluetooth to my iPhone. And someone who is blind and uses the screen reader on the iPhone can also have information displayed in Braille that they can touch and interact with. Beneath that is a switch interface that also connects through Bluetooth that allows someone who, again, may have severe physical limitations and may only be able to activate a single switch at a time. They can interact with their iPhone directly through switch interface support. And finally, on the right are the Apple AirPod Pros, which are, again, listening devices for all of us, but they also include features that support accessibility and actually support those who have some hearing loss. Again, these are off-the-shelf technologies that work with other off-the-shelf technologies to support accessibility needs. And so these are, again, significant advances that say that accessibility is becoming more mainstream in terms of how companies support it. So despite progress, which we're always glad to see, a lot of challenges remain. There's a rapid pace of technology development that continues to raise new accessibility barriers. Innovative startup companies come up with great products and great ideas, but they often ignore accessibility. They often focus on the concept of a minimally viable product or MVP, saying, well, we'll get to the accessibility later, or it's not important to our user community. And often, as we say, that if you don't address the accessibility up front, you're going to pay a lot more and spend more time re-engineering your systems to support it later. There's a lack of accessibility knowledge and training. You know, accessibility traditionally has not been a component of academic IT or UX academic programs. And so it's really important for us to be seeing developments like at Tampere, where we have accessibility now part of a formal academic training opportunity. And finally, one of the big concerns that we see and a challenge is the failure of people building technologies to actually engage with users who have disabilities when they do product design and development. It's a key missing piece to so much. And again, that's beginning to change, both through directly engaging with disability communities, as well as now more inclusive hiring, where we are hiring people with disabilities to be involved in product development. So that's really crucial. So the importance of usable accessibility is something that I talk about often. We have things like the W3C Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG, but I think it's really important for us to look beyond just a checklist approach to conformance to these accessibility guidelines. It's really absolutely crucial to understand the end user, their sensory, cognitive, and physical capabilities, and then what assistive technologies they use. What are the capabilities of those technologies? What are the limitations? Where can we improve the user experience? And I also like to highlight that, you know, even with best intentions, you can create accessible technologies that aren't usable. They may work and they may conform to, for example, WCAG, but the whole task model within the software or technology imparts too much cognitive load for someone who's visually impaired, and they find it very difficult or impossible to complete tasks. So again, it's really important to focus on usable accessibility and how people actually interact and match their capabilities to what you're offering. And an important note is that technical standards move on, and so the W3C is developing WCAG 3.0, and usability is a key factor in that new standard that is in development and will be out sometime in the future. We can't say exactly when. So let's talk about what happened. So back in January 2020, I like to say it was the best of times, but it was also more of the same. We were busy in the world of accessibility. We were developing and enhancing accessibility standards. We were working to introduce more accessibility knowledge and policies within our organizations. We were beginning to think about something that we're calling agile accessibility and how to better incorporate accessibility practices into product development. We were, of course, dealing with accessibility bugs and failures. We find things that don't work. We try to solve the problem and make it work for people with a disability. And we were worrying about new technologies like AR and VR, augmented and virtual reality, and then the implications of AI. And that's a whole talk in itself to look at what are the challenges with these new technologies. And we were attending conferences and doing internal investigations. So it was looking like another typical year for those of us in accessibility, challenges and ongoing work and progress. Okay, so there we go. So then January turned into February, turned into March, and COVID-19 began to impact our lives. We were in our first true global pandemic. Travel comes to a halt. Global uncertainty, what's happening? Businesses and schools closed, conferences canceled. We all thrive on conferences and accessibility, and suddenly we're not going to conferences. Unprecedented disruption of our daily lives. And I think this is a good point. This comes from a World Bank report that came out last fall on pivoting to inclusion. And the quote is, the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic quickly turned into a global health crisis that evoked an education emergency of an unprecedented scale. At the peak of the lockdown, the pandemic caused 180 countries to close schools temporarily, forcing 85% of the world's learners out of school. And working for an education nonprofit in the US, we were heavily focused on, what could we do to support remote education or remote learning? So we were faced with new challenges. The individual impact of COVID is tremendous. Students were asking, how would I go to school? Workers were saying, how can I do my job? There was tremendous stress imparted on all of us because we were dealing with unknown situations. We were concerned about our safety, our health, the health of our family members. We weren't at all sure about how we would proceed with life. Challenges of studying or working at home became new challenges for us, particularly if you could work or study from home. Many people could not effectively do that. We had what might be termed everything from first world problems of, hey, I don't have enough bandwidth to have 3 video streams at home, to I just don't even have internet connectivity in my home or where I live. So in effect, we all became situationally disabled by COVID. We were facing new problems, new concerns, and we had to find solutions. So what happened during 2020? We reached what we would call, I think, the COVID pandemic pivot. In less than a year, COVID drove a global adoption of remote work and distance learning. We moved from the physical common spaces where we were comfortable somewhat to learning and working in virtual spaces. This transition wasn't easy for everyone, and some of us had better experiences than others, but it was, again, a transition that we made globally. The key thing to note is that those facing challenges with digital technology before COVID were significantly more at risk of being further left behind with this transition. So technology accessibility issues were magnified when things did not work in this new model. So I will say this about many people who work in accessibility: we thrive on challenges and problem solving. So the COVID pivot and the shift to remote learning and work meant that accessibility was even more critical. The rapid adoption of tools like Zoom and Microsoft Teams was really highlighting where they had accessibility limitations. People could not participate using Zoom if they had use the screen reader effectively. So there were issues that had to be solved. Because if you did not solve them, that meant that people were being excluded from work or learning. So we were going from a controlled enterprise IT environment also, whether you were on a university campus or in a business, going from a very good support structure and infrastructure to now having essentially people working and being their own IT support. Again, more challenges. And just a quick look at Microsoft and Zoom. Over the course of 2020, we saw tremendous accessibility improvements both in Microsoft Teams and within Zoom. And I have on the screen on the right just some of the accessibility settings in Teams, as well as on the right, we have the Zoom accessibility settings. And so again, the companies that were providing these platforms responded to complaints and concerns about accessibility by doing rapid iterative updates to these products. Very important that they did this. So out of this crisis comes progress. For many of us in accessibility, our workload increased. We felt that now that we were at home and online all the time, we never left our offices, so to speak, our workload increased. We had to find a lot of new solutions to address barriers as they arose. And the old expression, thinking outside of the box, became ever more important, particularly in accessibility. We had to find solutions as how we could support a student using one kind of assistive technology that our IT teams had never thought about supporting. And so suddenly we're looking at how we can make these things work. I think for many of us in accessibility who've worked for a very long time with the W3C, we have already learned how to collaborate and communicate and problem solve virtually through the fact that W3C is an international organization, and we developed a lot of the skills and tools that we needed to address the challenge. So I like to look at it in the case of, well, what did we learn collectively from this pandemic? So lesson one, digital accessibility is essential. Said another way, accessibility is not an option. It should not be something you decide to do or not do. The legislation we have developing globally is key again to motivating people. We shouldn't use legal as a stick to say do accessibility, but it does help make the case. And I think it's important to say that if you're not considering accessibility in the design of products and services, you're essentially saying you don't care about a billion people who may not be able to use or buy your product. And those facing situational disabilities, not those with traditional physical or cognitive sensory disabilities, but any of us who are faced with a situational disability can benefit from these, as many of us did during the COVID pandemic. Lesson two, learn to treat accessibility failures as bugs. If some part of a software product doesn't work from Microsoft, people file bugs and that bug gets fixed or scheduled for fixing. Accessibility failures, where something doesn't work for someone who uses an assistive technology, for example, if it doesn't work, treat it with the same gravity as other software problems. companies need to expand their software testing and quality assurance to focus on accessibility. We're talking about shifting accessibility testing earlier in the development cycle. Test early, test often. And to do that, we need software developers and designers trained or at least knowledgeable in aspects of accessibility. So lesson 3, understand and involve people with disabilities in product design and development. There's a statement that's often used, nothing for us without us. It says basically, don't design things for people without disabilities, without involving them in the process. As a designer, never assume you know the solution. Listen to individual disabilities and understand what works for them. And what we're seeing these days is that we've always now heard about bring your own devices or to work or school. Now it's bring your own assistive technologies. We need to understand the implications of that. Remote can have advantages. For people with some disabilities, to commute to an office or a classroom can raise daily barriers, particularly if you have a mobility disability or you may feel stigmatized by your own disability in public context. COVID has shown that for many professions and some learners, remote can work. So while we have much to learn about how this shift to remote helps people with disabilities and provides more opportunities, it is a positive development. But there's still a real digital divide, and there are practical matters such as economics, family structure, and housing that can impact the viability of remote work. And we need to understand how we can improve those situations also. Finally, lesson 5, accessibility can be the normal state of affairs. Learn from organizations like Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, and others. Develop the awareness, resources, and processes in your organizations. And again, training such as what's being offered now in Tampere can help achieve that. Incorporate accessibility and inclusive design practice in academic programs. Exactly, that's crucial. Select products and services that incorporate accessibility and reject those that don't. Don't reinforce companies that aren't attending to accessibility. And promote that the concept of a minimally viable product is not viable without accessibility. And I just want to highlight something that came to my attention earlier this year as members of my own group at ETS who have disabilities were signing up for COVID vaccinations. I asked how it was going, and they said, well, it actually worked pretty well. I used a screen reader, it worked pretty well. So the Johns Hopkins University has been maintaining this international dashboard on COVID, where the disease is active, where it isn't. They also developed a vaccine website accessibility dashboard, which lists the accessibility support and scores for various states in the US and agencies that provide COVID information and vaccine registration. So making accessibility more visible, like who's doing it well, who's doing it badly. I think that's important. So lessons that we may not have learned. There's a strong desire to return to normal, but for many of us, there's a great concern that we will return to the old normal. The things that worked and promoted inclusion may disappear as we return to in-person environments. Hybrid environments where some people remain remote and others work and learn in person will lead to differences in presence. What was once a common virtual playing field for all of us becomes limited by technology now and how people can fully participate. Well, some people are huddling in the conference room or in the classroom talking about something while those online are now feeling left out. So again, how do we solve that problem as we return to work and learning? Leaving behind the good developments. There are some really significant things that I've heard and seen and benefited from myself that come from these accessible and inclusive virtual environments. People can receive real-time captioning and subtitles. People can adjust the audio. How many times have someone been in a large meeting room or a classroom and couldn't hear the speaker clearly? Now with our own portal into meetings, we can make those adjustments. We can make the screen text larger. We can actually magnify what the slides are as they're being presented. These are all benefits that have come from virtual meetings that will be somewhat interesting to translate into hybrid meetings and also bring forward into in-person meetings. Accessibility bugs that were impacting remote learning and collaboration were prioritized for fixing, as we saw with both Microsoft Teams and Zoom. But now we might go back to the state, well, why don't you just get someone in the office to help you access that as an easier, lower cost solution? So we can't go back to that kind of model. And of course, we don't want to see inaccessible paper documents and forms, which universities and businesses often love. We don't want them to make a comeback. We're now doing things digitally and digital first. Let's stay there. So in closing, accessibility and inclusive design needs to be a part of everything that we create, design, and build. The pandemic has really highlighted the need for accessibility as we rushed into this new world of remote work and learning. So this need continues as we develop new technology and tools to support us in this post-COVID world now. So we're going to keep evolving and adapting technologies. Let's make sure we do it inclusively and accessibly. And finally, there are challenging problems and exciting opportunities ahead in accessibility. You know, the whole world of artificial intelligence applications, augmented and virtual reality, these are exciting and also challenging capabilities for us to make accessible. So I'll go to questions if there are any.
Thank you, Mark, for this excellent presentation. As said, it is really timely, and you are among the persons who really can see the big picture. So this was very convincing for us to think of how we are going to return to the new world. I also hope that we are not going back to the old world and lose the benefits that we are having. So, for example, in the case of education, we must now design carefully how we are going to approach our educational offerings in the future, how we are keeping the benefits that we have gained during this otherwise quite heavy times that we have faced. And I believe that all kind of hybrid solutions which also take accessibility into account are among the most important findings that we hopefully will get out of this. But others, please have comments, questions. Now it's an excellent opportunity to ask from one of the leading experts in the world about where we are heading.
Hi, this is Maija Hirvonen. I may start. Thank you very much. That was an excellent presentation and responding to many of our ideas as well. It became also very clear that you have a long experience and vast experience in the field of accessibility. And here in Europe, we often also think that the US as a country, as a state, has paid a lot of effort to accessibility issues for a long time. So could you somehow briefly or not so briefly summarize the current legislation or make some highlights from the legislation related to accessibility in the US?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, and I'm also excited to learn what's happening in the European Union as you follow the same road that we are. I think that what we have in the US is something called Section 508, which is a federal law, and it mandates that government agencies acquire technology that is accessible. And when there's a choice between a product that isn't accessible and one that is, you choose always the product that's accessible. The Section 508 law was updated a few years ago to conform to the latest W3C WCAG standards, WCAG 2.0. And some of you already know, if you follow it, that we're at WCAG 2.1 already. And WCAG 2.2 is likely to come out later this year. And so what we're seeing is recognition that, okay, the federal law says WCAG 2.0, but many organizations and companies are now requiring conformance with the latest W3C requirements. Something that the European requirements, I think, stated better in some ways is that usability is crucial. The Section 508 requirements talk about what are called functional performance requirements that says basically, if I have no vision, can I use this product? If I have limited hearing, can I use this product? And that gets more toward the usability requirements that we are interested in. And so we're seeing not just the federal government look at the accessibility requirements. We now have states such as California and others that mirror the Section 508 federal law, so that if you're trying to work with a state like California and offer products into their educational systems, you need to be able to ensure that they're accessible and conform with WCAG requirements. And again, companies are beginning to adopt digital policies that say, if we're going to acquire products, we're going to require the vendors to give us a Section 508 accessibility conformance report. You know, we want to buy products that support accessibility because they help our users and our customers. And so, again, these are changes becoming more visible. We also know that there's a lot of what I call litigation or lawsuits in the US where companies have a website, perhaps a company like Domino's Pizza, which offers pizza ordering online that isn't accessible. And so people will say that this service you're offering doesn't conform with the Americans with Disabilities Act, which says that I'm entitled to access public facilities. And so a lot of people will talk about the impact of litigation, which is fairly unique to the US environment. We're also seeing some companies which are beginning to sort of try to profit from accessibility by developing solutions, what are termed accessibility overlays, that claim with a single line of JavaScript to fix all your accessibility problems. That isn't really possible. And so there are a lot of different currents within the US accessibility world. There's a lot of noise, there is litigation, but there's real progress also. And you just have to be able to be accessibility aware to try to determine, you know, what's useful information, what's not useful to us in solving accessibility problems. So that's sort of a meandering response at 4:30 and 5 o'clock in the morning for me, but I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, it did, yes, and I forgot about the time difference.
Not
well done, well done then.
Plenty of
Any other questions?
Coffee.
Yeah. We have a couple of minutes for more questions or comments. Perhaps the silence also shows that the accessibility as a theme, as a development is rather new in Finland, even though we have had these services, certain services and certain practices ongoing, but still on a general level.
Maya and Mark, if there are no any other comments or questions, I have one for Mark. For what we have seen here, we already know that there's a lot of accessibility challenges in countries like Finland, US, Europe in general. But if you think the situation in emerging market areas, I think there are other kind of challenges, and quite often in our field, it has been said that we can't export the findings, which are often very Western culture oriented into these areas. So, what do you think of this? What we can do in this respect? I think it's a quite global challenge we are facing.
Yeah, I think that's a very good one, and one that we're trying to focus on. This is a global economy. And how do we address the unique cultural or linguistic needs for accessibility? I think a lot of the thinking within the World Wide Web Consortium has been to begin to look at how do we better address language and cultural differences in terms of accessibility. I think you'll see more developments in that area. I think for some time we often saw accessibility as an Anglo-centric focus. People talked about an English web, and we have to realize that this is a global web, and many linguistic and language challenges, which was mentioned earlier. Some of the work that we're doing right now in W3C is to try to develop a standard to improve the quality and accuracy of spoken presentation. And so again, a lot of information is being translated into text-to-speech. And when you have mixed language content on web pages, when you have languages that aren't well supported by text-to-speech, how do we ensure that someone who needs an audio presentation gets something that is actually accurate and meaningful? And so we just published a first working draft of a new standard in W3C this past week, and we're looking for feedback from implementers from around the world as to whether this helped solve part of that problem. There's also a greater focus on how to make content more understandable for individuals with language or cognitive impairments. Again, how we can simplify language on the web. These are all, things that are important to try to address.
Thank you. It definitely seems that there's a lot of work ahead, but we are on the right track, I believe, by saying it is allowed now and then addressing those as possible. Now I'd like to thank you once more, Mark. This was an excellent starting for the presentations, and I do hope that we will continue working with you in many ways.
Yeah, I look forward to that, and I hope to see you later this summer in Finland.
Yes, definitely. So you are more than welcome.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And
of Tampere University, Mari Walls. We are delighted to have you here. And a couple of words before you start, perhaps on the from our part. So Mari Walls leads the new Tampere University, which has 3 focal areas: society, technology, and health. And as we at TAKU see it, accessibility is a natural part of these areas, actually spanning across the 3 and combining them to an important societal development. So I'm very happy to hear our president's thoughts on accessibility now. The floor or the screen is yours.
Thank you very much, and I'm really pleased to be here and have a few words, even though I was not able to follow the discussions prior to my short presentation. But really, dear organizers and speakers, teachers and learners, and other stakeholders joining this seminar. So good early afternoon from Tampere. And my name is Mari Walls. I'm president of Tampere University. And I'm really pleased for the opportunity to talk very briefly at this launching event of the new Introduction to Accessibility MOOC and the Accessibility in the Digital Society courses. The new study module, I think one could say, is a trailblazer on both the Finnish and the global perspective. It approaches accessibility from a wide range of research-based perspectives and deals with the roles of both people and technology. I'm very confident that the study module will greatly help accelerate the local and global processes for making digital accessibility the new norm in society. The new study module is built on decades of research, education, and societal interaction related to the fields like information and communication technologies, digitalization, gamification, psychology, and user experience, accessibility, and many different aspects of society carried out in higher education establishments in Tampere. This work continues broadly at the new Tampere University, which was established through a merger in 2019 to combine and further solidify the strengths of its predecessors, Tampere University of Technology and University of Tampere. Our new university brings together research and education, focusing on technology, health, and society. So these 3 very broad areas that are very exciting. And of course, there's a lot of promise for multidisciplinary approaches when one is thinking about the combinations and possibilities. Our purpose is to work together to build a sustainable world. And of course, together with our partners, we develop also research-based solutions to tackle climate change, preserve the natural environment, and improve the well-being and sustainability of societies. Our foundation is laid on equality and the appreciation of different people, fields, and traditions. We also aim to evoke curiosity and a thirst for learning, and to promote development potential in all our actions. So, ladies and gentlemen, in addition to being topics of research and education, accessibility and digital society are already an integral part of our daily lives. In the context of academic community, we use the term accessibility to refer to an environment that affords everyone an equal opportunity to work and study, regardless of their personal characteristics. In tangible terms, this means that Tampere University, our facilities management staff, develop the accessibility of physical facilities, and our IT services staff, for instance, work to ensure the accessibility of electronic services and web content. In the learning side, our university promotes accessibility by embedding diversity in the curricula and by offering flexible opportunities for students to demonstrate their learning and complete their studies. Accessibility is also further enhanced by the ongoing digitalization of campuses. We have 3 campuses, main campuses here at Tampere, and 2 additional campuses in Pori and Seinäjoki. And of course, digitalization of campuses makes it increasingly easy to pursue work or studies regardless of the boundaries of time and space in our region, nationwide and globally. As we all know, this development has gained a huge boost from the global pandemic that we have all experienced and are experiencing currently. So we've been able to develop our activities and also promote accessibility through the digitalization that has really boosted during the past year and a half. At Tampere University and Tampere University of Applied Sciences, digital transformation is guided by our own digitalization project. On the campuses of the future, physical, digital, and virtual environments will be blended together in ways that we may not yet be able to envision fully. The most important thing in digitalization is not the number of gadgets and programs, but the ability to utilize them, which in turn is very closely linked with success in achieving accessibility. So regardless of your background, your personal characteristics, your skills, you should be able to have access to the learning environments and research environments. Digitalization is expected to pave the way for personalized learning, support open science, and foster effective collaboration with internal and external partners. The Introduction to Accessibility MOOC and the Accessibility in the Digital Society courses launched today provide an easy access to research-based resources for individuals and organizations to develop readiness and abilities required in the digital society. I wish that the use of this opportunity is something that we all take on board. And of course, there's a big thank to everyone who has worked now for through hard efforts to achieve these goals. So now we are ready to launch the new study modules. And I wish to express my sincere thanks to the Tampere University Takku for organizing this event. I wish every success for the new introductory MOOC and hope that it will encourage learners from a wide range of backgrounds to delve more deeply into the other courses to achieve their personal goals. A digital world that is accessible to everyone is also everyone's business. Thank you very much for the opportunity to say a few words in this event.
Thank you very much for participating. And we just talked about the mega trends in the world and combined or linked accessibility to that actually. And as you mentioned, it's about creating a sustainable world and sustainable society. And we strongly believe and see it already happening, that accessibility as one part of sustainable society is indeed in the game. So
thank you.
Thank you very much.
I like also to thank our president for these kind words, and it's great to hear that we have this kind of attitude in our university. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I think we are now moving on to the last part of our event, and actually in which we will learn and have more specific information about how then to participate in this accessibility education that we are about to offer. I don't know if we have a couple of minutes before that part starts, so if anyone wants to express themselves, make a comment, make a question, then now is the time.
Okay, hello. This is Teemu Rauhala speaking. Can you hear my voice? Unfortunately,
yes,
unfortunately, I don't have a camera available right here, but I believe this is my time to speak about the practical information about enrollment and stuff. My name is Teemu Rauhala. I come from the continuous learning unit at the university, and I've been working with Markku, Pauliina, and others at Takku to bring these courses available also to the wide public, not just degree students. So I'm really excited that we are now able to launch and publish some of these courses. And as we have heard today, the topics are really such that they are relevant to different target groups, different professionals, different organizations, and almost every walk of life. And the skills really are such that we all as professionals, experts, workers do need to upskill or update our knowledge about accessibility, what it means in our work, what it means in our organization, and how we need to cope with that. And to that end, I'm really happy that we are able to offer also courses for professional development. And the list of all the courses that are going to be available is already on our web pages. And there is also a timetable about when the courses will be open for enrollment. So please keep up with those web pages to follow the updates that we bring to web pages for the publishing timetables. But there's already some of the courses that are available as of today, also in English and Finnish. The course list, the course content, and the description of the information about the courses are on the web page that you can see there right now. And the enrollment practice is such that there is the application form, and from the application form you can just choose which course or courses you would like to enroll to. And the Introduction to Accessibility MOOC, which is free, 1 credit, that you don't need any university ID to enroll, but all the others are such that you will be made university ID that you can use to access the courses online. But just filling in the application form, you will receive more information about the ID and enrollment and how to get to the courses. So this is basically the practical information here, and my contact information is also on the web page. So if there's any problem with the enrollment, just please be in contact with me. Thank you.
Markku, you're muted, or somehow we don't hear you.
Okay, too many
Yes.
buttons available for me. So thank you, Teemu, for introducing how in practice these courses are available, hopefully for all of you. Please check the introductions from the web pages, and please don't hesitate to contact any of us if you have any questions, challenges, or anything like that. Of course, we like to be as accessible as possible. But I believe now it's a time for discussion. So we hope that there are questions, comments, anything from the audience before we move to the final words. Silence might mean that everything has been clear. We hope so. So I think we can now thank all the presenters for the wonderful presentations, very informative ones, and something that gives us a food for thought and encourages us to go further with these activities. Of course, it's also time to thank the whole TAKKU team. There are a lot of people who have been involved in implementation of this educational offering, and it has been a really hard work since most of this has been done in addition to our other workload. But I can see that the enthusiasm and motivation of the people who are been putting this forward is really strong, stronger than in many other cases that I have seen in my research and educational career. So thank you for everybody on my behalf. I think we can conclude the meeting, and please enroll to the MOOC and start to do things with us.
Yes, like Markku said, thank you very much for coming or being there, and thank you for the excellent presentations. And our TAKKU team is very wonderful, and we'll continue the good work. And everyone, please be in touch in any case about accessibility education or research.
So thank you everybody and bye.